Chapter 20, in which the Maybelle catches something big. "What's going on?" Gift demanded, getting up to his feet. He didn't mind his sheets that were scattered onto the floor. He'll pick them up later. "I have no idea at the moment, but I'll check it out myself," Fred shouted, and carefully heads out to the bulwark. There he can see the crane dipping lower, dragging the ship to starboard, the steel rope incredibly taut. He calls out to Isaac, who is on the rail. "What's happening? You got something bigger?" "Probably," Isaac said. "The net wouldn't budge. Shall we cut it?" "No!" Fred yelled. "Bring it in!" "But the crane will snap, and the motor!" "I think we just caught a shark that's trying to break loose," Bugsy stated. "I charge extra for sharks," Fred said. "I'm not going to have it tear up one of my nets." Kitty and Giff came out on deck. "Kitty," Fred ordered, "go in my cabin and bring me a harpoon. It's a Jarman M28 bolt-action harpoon gun. Now get it!" She was hesitant because she thought she saw the crane bending down under the weight of the catch and hear the motors whining. "Don't just stand there!" Fred shouted. "Do it, or you're buying me a new net!" She immediately runs off to the front of the bulwark. "And Mr. Rogers, go down and help those sailors," he ordered. Suddenly, the force relented. The boat slowly receded to normal as if the fish had given up the fight. Pride overcame Fred. "Well, what are you waiting for?" he asked Giff. "Go down there. We got something very big over here." Giff nodded. "Okay. Better not be a shark, though." Then he heads down on deck. Fred immediately followed him. The motors whine as the net is being hoisted up. Fred said to the sailors, "What did I tell you, men? Sometimes you have to take any risk when it comes to catching. Fish likes to test the ingenuity of the average fisherman. Any fish." The sailors look up at a huge net that is full of fish in front of them. The crew was anxious, but even with so many fish, the net was not torn. The crane hauls the net to the left, towards the fishing hold. However, Isaac looks up. "What's that up there?" "What?" Fred asked, also looking up. "I saw something huge," Isaac stated. "It might be a marlin or a sunfish," Bugsy said. "But I know it's going to make ourselves a fortune." Just then, the net is being lowered to the fishing hold. And that's when Fred saw it. What he saw on the top of that catch was a huge catfish, but it was unlike any he had ever seen. The skin was pitch black with a white underbelly. It has a cavernous mouth with pink lips curved into a smile that have short, thin whiskers growing from the lower lips. Long barbels grow from its cheeks. He orders the crew, "Stop lowering!" The lowering immediately stopped. "What kind of creature is this?" Bugsy asked. "I don't know," Fred said. "Go get Mr. Barnes from the wireless room." So Bugsy came back from the wireless room with Larry following him. Then Larry stared at the fish, amazed. A magnificent specimen, the largest he had ever seen. He hasn't even heard of that fish in his paperback guidebook before. However, all Fred can see right now is gold painted all over it. "Have you ever seen a catfish this huge before?" Larry asked. "No," Fred said. "But whether it's endangered or least concerned, we'll be making a fortune with this when we get back to Morimo." Later, after the fish were being stored in the hold, the sailors had the catfish placed on deck, as they all gather round to look at it. Even Giff brings his cat Aloysius to see it. Larry and Bugsy were standing at the front, stretching a tape measure across the body. "Good Lord!" Larry exclaimed. "It's a 12-footer, as in 4 meters. 900 pounds of him." "That does remind me of an old fishing story," Hector said. "It once happened to the Orowitz. The fish they caught is a 20-footer. "I don't like that thing smiling at me," Isaac said. "And you call yourself a sailor," Bugsy said. "That doesn't sound seaworthy enough." "I'm sorry. Have you been hired as a fisherman lately?" Isaac demanded. "I wouldn't serve as a fisherman on board the Kokone Maru in 1929. I haven't seen anything like it before, especially a catfish this huge." Just be glad that you won't be seeing that for the rest of the trip, Gift said. It'll stay in the hole till we get to shore. That's when Fred suspects something amiss. Wait a minute, where's Kitty? He asked. I wanted to see this too. I'll be right back. I know where she is. She may be still in my cabin. Then he heads off. How are we going to get this out of the ship when we get back to the harbor? Bugsy asked. It'll take a lot of people to keep this fresh. Some kind of crane with lifting straps, Larry said. But I recommend studying it first. It may be considered an endangered species. Fred came back with Kitty, placing his hands onto her eyes, guiding her to the deck. Oh, Fred, is this necessary? She asked. I could have closed my eyes instead. Too bad. We're nearly there, he said. You're going to be amazed with our catch. Oh, am I? She groaned. You bet. With a fish as large as 4 meters, you would. Ready? Yes, I'm ready. Let's get this over with. He immediately pulled his hands away and shouted, Ta-da! She stared at the huge catfish. Then she froze. An image flashed into her mind. Suddenly, she was back in the library at Kadono, sitting by the table and reading Stranger Things in an Ordinary City by Furukawa Ryotaro. In the book, there was a paragraph discussing one of the creatures. One of them was a huge catfish with black skin and a huge grin. At the exact same moment, those words. Capturing a stormfish as small as 4 meters is considered dangerous and must be tossed back into the sea or suffer the wrath of the others. Kitty felt the words bombard into her brain, and before Fred can talk to her about his finding, she immediately cried, I want you to get that fish off the ship right now! What? Fred asked, shocked. Get it off the ship! She repeated. You can't be serious. But she kept screaming, Get it off the ship! Toss it back into the water! Why should we toss it back? Larry demanded. This is an interesting find. Toss it back into the water! She frantically said. Toss it back, or you'll be sorry! But Fred has heard enough. Hey, who's in charge here, Kitty? He demanded. I wouldn't want you telling me what or what not to do. Now please don't get rough on me. I'm not going to say it again, she screamed. You have to toss that fish back in the water! Kitty! He shouted, grabbing her by the arm and pulling towards him. Why would we do that? I thought you'd be pleased. We could be making a fortune when we get back. Hissing, she scratched his arm with her claws. He immediately released her, screaming in pain and holding his arm. Bugsy demanded, Why would you do that? You will understand, Kitty screamed. That fish you caught is extremely dangerous! How dangerous? Doesn't look dangerous to me because of that stupid grin the fish makes. Don't let appearance betray you. Underneath that, he's actually a terror of the sea. If you know so much about this fish, then what is it? Fred groaned while holding his arm. I don't think that's an ordinary catfish. It's a stormfish, she said. Arashi no Sakana! They were called the terror of the sea for that reason. They possess the ability to create strong waves, earthquakes, and violent storms to bring the rage of the sea upon those who anger them. You mean there may be more of them? Gif asked. It's a possibility, she said. I've read about it. Probably from a book that doesn't even exist, Bugsy said. Right now, I'm telling you this for your own good. Be reasonable for this expedition, Fred said. It's only one fish, albeit supernatural. How bad could catching one unusual fish be? Enough for you and your crew to face unpleasant consequences ahead, she sneered. I'm warning you. If you don't toss it back into the sea, you're going to regret it. All of you! Then you shouldn't be here in the first place, are you? Fred demanded. His voice grew more strident. This fish is staying below, and that's final. If you don't want to be a part of it, you can just jump off and swim back to the city. I hope you can make it that far. She was not in the mood to argue any further, slinking away like a chastised dog. She knew that he will surely pay for his arrogance, especially when she scratched his arm. But that was considered a slap on the wrist compared to what's to come. "All right, lads," he addressed those still gathered around the stormfish. "Let's take this bloated sardine below and put it on ice." Then he pointed threateningly at her. "And you, Kitty, I will expect better behavior from you. Am I clear?" Then Cyril takes Fred to his office, while Giff pleadingly takes her back to his cabin, just as the stormfish is lowered inside the fishing hold with the rest of the catch. "The fools!" she shouted, while she storms inside, followed by Giff. "The reckless, irresponsible fools! They're sure to get killed for their thoughtlessness someday!" "Don't say that, Kitty," he cried. "Fred has a point about you, though. You have to play by his rules. If you don't, you'll only get in deeper trouble than you are now. You already hurt him by scratching his arm. Just be grateful that you remain on his ship." "Just be grateful! Just be grateful!" Her voice carried a tone of cruel mimicry. He sighed. "Kitty, why do you want him to throw that fish back into the sea? Why is it so important to you? You heard what he said. Just imagine how much money we can make if—" "I sense the possibility of tragedy through a book I've read at the library," she said. "All these consequential details of what will happen if a seaman only captured one as large as 4 meters. "I don't think there is such a book about this kind of fish." "At least that's what you thought at first. We shall see when a natural catastrophe at sea can bring a premature end to the Maybelle expedition." He paled. "Surely we can reason with these fish." "Reason with them?" she said. "I wish you could, but that's not how it works. The creatures I've read about, some were not very lenient, or so I read." "Don't reason with the captain again, Kitty. I don't want you to get in more trouble." "Who said I am? He'll just have to wait and see what happens. He might as well think of my warning as a bluff." "Does that mean only Fred will pay for his mistakes?" Her eyes droop, her voice a sudden sadness. "And his crew will pay with him. It's not that simple." Fred removed the towel from his forearm with a hiss. The 4 angry red scratch marks were worse than he'd dealt with recently, and they stung and bit at his nerves. It's been 15 minutes, and already his arm begins to redden and swell, which isn't likely to be easily ignored. Cyril takes the towel from him and tosses it into the laundry bin. Cyril opens his first aid kit and pulls out a bottle of peroxide. "Put your arm over the basin," he instructed. "It may sting. As soon as I wrap this up, you may go." As soon as Fred has his arm over the basin, Cyril pours the peroxide onto the scratches. Fred winced as the peroxide burned onto his arm, but it does clean the wound. As soon as it fizzes onto the scratches, Cyril wraps the arm around with gauze. "Now, you can still do your duties, Captain, but I want you to know that they're going to heal long after you return to the harbor," Cyril stated. "No thanks to this girl, no doubt," Fred said. "By the way, about those scratches," Cyril said, realizing about something. "If I didn't know correctly, I think they awfully look like claw marks, like it was done by a cat or something." Then Fred froze. What if this Frenchman found out about what Kitty looked like? He immediately distracted him by asking, "What do you mean?" "The only cat in this boat I know belongs to the cabin boy." "I know," Cyril said, "but these marks are too big for a normal cat like the one belonging to your cabin boy." "Then clearly, Kitty has sharp fingernails." Cyril shook his head suspiciously. "I don't think so, Captain. No girl has fingernails that can cause cuts on a man's arm. Only one way to find out for sure." He turns to leave. "Where do you think you're going?" Fred demanded. "It seemed that something may be off about the girl you've brought onto the ship, Captain," Cyril stated. "I want to know what she really is." "Like hell you do," Fred snapped. "You think she's different? She's like any girl back in the city." "Except no girl that has sharp fingernails." "Can't you see that she's gone enough trouble already? Questioning her of what she is will make no difference, I promise you." I'm sure she won't mind having me question her under the circumstances, if she's behaved enough. You stay away from that girl, and I want you to drop the subject. Do you understand me? Someday I want to know the truth, and so will everyone on the ship, Seal stated. Fred turned from the door and glared. Do you understand me? Before Cyril can say anything, Fred slammed the door. Stressed, Cyril sat under the hospital bed, muttering to himself. There's that trash. There's no way a girl can claw a person like that, as much as a cat would. Fred enters Kozlov's cabin from inside the wheelhouse, where he finds his first mate sitting on the side of the bed and drinking his glass of Smirnoff vodka. When Kozlov saw the gauze on Fred's arm, even he was appalled. But he can't help but smirk and laugh softly. I'd be just as embarrassed as you if the same thing happens to me, to my arm, comrade, he stated. That reminds me of the time I go out hunting with my comrades in the wilderness during the late winter. We drank vodka to warm ourselves. A wolf attacked me and bit my leg. It just clamped until my fellows killed it. Then I was transferred to the local hospital where I get stitches. Then his mood changes. And right now I get the feeling that this was somewhat different. I ask, how does Venus manage to cut you like that? She has sharp fingernails, Fred said. Funny, I do not recall girls with sharp nails, comrade. Not even from Leningrad. I think it is best not to talk about Miss Venus anymore, just as long as she doesn't cause any trouble. How I pity you, as if you were hiding something about this girl. Is that how I should spend our vacation? Having men like you judge others because they're different? As long as Miss Venus remains on the ship, I had the feeling that your men will be more superstitious than ever. If you are hiding something about what she is, let us hope the men never suspect you of something like that. Unless you want to drive them to turn against you. To mutiny. Upon hearing that word, as if it was a profane one, Fred turned and glared dangerously at his first mate. That is the very last thing I want to happen on my ship during this expedition, Mr. Kozlov, he said. Throughout the day, Kitty remained in a foul mood, ever since Fred was actually stupid enough to have a stormfish be kept inside the hold, instead of setting it free back into the sea from whence it came. However, her mood did change when the sun lowered downward and disappeared into the water, leaving the sky streaked with orange and gold before bringing forth the first night of the expedition. By then, the Maybelle would become a silhouette against the indigo and midnight blue of the sky and the sea, with the interior lights gleaming. With neither wind nor tide to carry it, even with the engine stopped, the boat sat motionless on the water. To her, that means there was no noticeable bobbing to tell her that she was at sea. She was with Giff, standing at the rail together, staring out across the sea around them. Nothing but water in every direction. A pang of homesickness throbbed through them. So far away from here, Kadono. Isn't it foolish, Kitty? He asked. It's been the first day and already I'm starting to feel homesick.
Why worry about that, Giff? She exclaimed. It's a beautiful night.
She looks up.
I don't think I've ever seen so many stars all at one time.
You haven't? She nodded, her voice becoming soft.
Amazing, isn't it? So bright up there, with the sea around you. It does make one feel so small and insignificant. I mean, you turn off all the lights in the world, and what do you see other than darkness? You can probably see a part of the universe. Does that make you feel better about being homesick?
Probably a little, Kitty, he said.
A little?
She laughed.
If you want, I'd get them for you if I could.
That's when Fred approached them. You're wanted in the mess, he told Giff. They want to hear music, especially from a college boy. How convenient, Captain, Giff said. God knows they can't survive without music. Fred lightly slaps him across the head. Don't give me any smart talk, boy, and get inside, he whispered. I need some time with Miss Felinas for a while. I see, Giff said. Hopefully you two can come to dinner later. We'll see that we do, Fred said. As soon as Giff heads inside the mess, Fred turns to Kitty, but she's already glaring at him. He spoke cautiously. Please, come to my cabin, Kitty. We need to talk about something. He took her by the hand and led her to his cabin behind the wheelhouse. Inside his cabin, there was a polished mahogany bed with drawers underneath positioned to the side facing the portholes, shelves of books bolted to the walls, an oak desk on the corner next to the door which leads to the wheelhouse. On the other side is a wardrobe which may contain his bottles of liquor. He switched on the light and asked her to sit on the edge of the bed. He said, I do not mind you being a girl, but it's what you did to my arm that's conspicuous. I want you to be careful, Kitty. My specialist, Mr. Lefebvre, is already suspecting you because of the way you scratch a person. Already her face becomes cat-like.
Oh, he has, hasn't he? When he does, the rest follows.
Through gritted teeth, he said, I will not let them.
How long do you think before...
It's already the first day of this expedition, and I'm not going to give the game away now. Please.
You ever expect your men to trust a girl on board?
Well, there's that cabin boy. Clearly he doesn't mind. But the others, especially Mr. Lefebvre.
I do understand, Fred. I do think it's going to be difficult. A long 8 days at sea. You mustn't hope too much. It'll do you no good. Especially when you had that fish locked in the hole instead of tossing it back.
I already told you, Kitty, he said. It's just one fish. One. And do you want to know how much we are willing to make if we take it to Moimo? Clearly, there may be more out there if you do know that such a fish existed in these waters.
I do not wish to know how much money you will make, Fred,
Kitty snapped.
Every minute you have refused is critical, and it will get more critical for each day that passes. I had to scratch your arm because you have refused to listen, but I don't think even that will be enough to change your mind.
Sighing, he said, Kitty, why must you insist that I'm a terrible person? Is it because I catch one stormfish? I'm only here doing a job, and you should do the same.
Oh, Fred,
she glared.
How I never realized how selfish you really are before coming on this boat, or how deceitful, or how foolhardy.
Kitty, he snapped. I wish to not talk about this anymore, because I find that you're bluffing about these things. Like it or otherwise, that fish stays until we head to the harbor, and right now, we must eat dinner at the mess.
Well, I want you to know that I've tried so hard to warn you, Captain, she said. Sooner or later, somewhere out there in the sea will make you wish you never called what I say a bluff.
Then she storms off, as he remained in his cabin with his thoughts. I really should have thrown her overboard, then I wouldn't have to hear any more of her pointless rants. I hope she can swim back, if at all.